When we think about a bacterial infection, there's this expectation of a clear, straightforward battle. A home invasion, someone kicks in the front door, the alarm bells go off, and the whole cavalry shows up. The immune system spots the invaders, responds aggressively with inflammation and white blood cells, and a doctor can just swab the site, grow the bacteria on a petri dish, and say, there's the culprit. Clean, simple, broken or not broken. But then you step into the world of intracellular bacteria, and that whole home invasion metaphor completely falls apart. These particular invaders aren't kicking in the front door at all. They are slipping in through the ventilation shafts, taking off their disguises, and quietly living inside the very walls of your house. By the time you even realize something is wrong, the structural damage is already done. And that murky, hidden world is exactly what we're decoding today, pulling directly from the 7th edition of Mahone's textbook of diagnostic microbiology, which is the source material for this video and a core text on the ASCP reading list. Speaking of which, if you want the full reference at your fingertips, Mahone's textbook of diagnostic microbiology is currently available at a discount on Walmart. I'll drop the link in the description. It's genuinely one of the best investments you can make for your ASCP prep. Now, we are talking about bacteria that act like viruses. They are what we call obligate intracellular parasites, meaning they absolutely require the inside of a living host cell to survive and multiply. They've essentially jettisoned the genetic machinery they would need to live independently. So to diagnose and treat them, scientists have to completely rethink how bacteria even function, because the old rules of microbiology simply do not apply here. Let's start with their biology, specifically the Chlamydiaceae family, because to understand the diseases they cause, you really have to understand how bizarre their life cycle is. The research classifies them as energy parasites, and that is a remarkably accurate description. Most bacteria are self-sufficient, they generate their own ATP to fuel their metabolism, build their cell walls, and replicate. But not this family. The Chlamydia family lacks the metabolic engines to do this. They can synthesize a tiny amount of ATP, but primarily they just siphon it directly off from the host cell they've invaded. They literally plug into our cellular grid, draining the cellular batteries to fuel their own reproduction, and they do this through a biphasic, two-phase growth cycle. They switch between two very distinct forms, the elementary body, EB, and the reticulate body, RB. The elementary body is the infectious form, a highly condensed, metabolically inactive version of the bacteria. It is built for one specific purpose, to survive outside of a host cell. Think of it as an armored transport vehicle, tough with a rigid outer membrane, driving through the environment looking for a target cell, but not replicating yet, just looking for a door. And the mechanism it uses to enter that target cell. Brilliant. The EB doesn't bore through the cell membrane, it chemically tricks the host cell into swallowing it whole. This is called induced phagocytosis. The host cell extends its own membrane, wraps the EB in a little cellular bubble called a phagosome, and pulls it inside. It tricks the host into opening the front door and literally inviting the burglar in. A microscopic confidence game. And once it's inside, phase 2 begins. The EB transforms into the reticulate body, RB. Larger, non-infectious, no armor, but it multiplies rapidly. The factory worker steps out of the transport vehicle, builds a hidden factory inside the cell, and redirects all that stolen ATP toward manufacturing thousands of new armored vehicles. This is essentially a cellular hostage situation. The host cell is kept alive just long enough to serve as an incubator. After about 35 to 40 hours, the cell becomes so gorged with newly manufactured elementary bodies that the membrane simply ruptures, the cell dies, and the new EBs spill out to infect all the neighboring cells. And this biphasic cycle, this whole hidden factory strategy, is the exact reason why diagnosing these infections historically drove microbiologists crazy. You can't swipe them onto a petri dish and wait for colonies, because they have no host cells to hijack on a sterile plate. For decades, labs had to maintain live human or animal cell lines, infect them with the patient sample, incubate them, and manually search for those hidden factories under a microscope. Agonizingly slow, technically demanding, and prone to contamination. Modern diagnostics had to pivot, from growing the bacteria to finding its genetic blueprint instead. Enter nucleic acid amplification tests, NAATs. These bypass the need for live bacteria entirely. Specialized enzymes locate the specific genetic sequence of the bacteria, and even if there are only a few fragments of bacterial DNA present, the test amplifies them, copying them millions of times over a few hours until there is a massive, easily detectable signal. You're finding the needle in the haystack by multiplying the needle until it's larger than the haystack. Now, understanding how these bacteria hijack our cells really clarifies the immense human cost of this strategy. Because one single species, Chlamydia trachomatis, is particularly devastating, and it presents two very different faces depending on the specific strain. The first face is trachoma, the #1 cause of preventable blindness in the entire world. An estimated 400 million people are infected globally, and roughly 6 million have been rendered totally blind. It thrives in hot, dry climates near the equator, spreads through communities lacking clean water, and is often mechanically carried from eye to eye by flies seeking moisture. But the mechanism of the blindness is what's truly horrifying, and it is not a toxin destroying the optic nerve. It is a mechanical blindness. The bacteria cause chronic, repeated infection in the conjunctiva, the delicate membrane lining the inside of the eyelid. Because of that constant cycle of cells being hijacked, rupturing, and dying, the immune system floods the eye with inflammatory cells, trying to fix the damage. But this chronic inflammation creates deep, rigid scar tissue on the inside of the eyelid. As that scar tissue matures and contracts over months and years, it physically pulls the edge of the eyelid inward, so the eyelashes turn inside out, scraping against the cornea every single time the person blinks, causing ulcerations, inviting secondary infections, and ultimately turning the clear cornea opaque. A slow, agonizing descent into irreversible blindness, entirely driven by the body's prolonged inflammatory response to a hidden pathogen. The second phase of C. trachomatis is urogenital infection, the most common sexually transmitted bacterial pathogen in the United States, with an estimated 2.8 million cases annually. It can even be passed to newborns during vaginal delivery, leading to severe conjunctivitis or pneumonia in the infant. But here is the most staggering detail: the stealth. Up to 80% of infected women and 50% of infected men are completely asymptomatic. If a bacterial infection is actively destroying human cells to reproduce, why are so many people walking around with it feeling perfectly fine? Because the bacteria are hiding inside the host's own cells, they are heavily shielded from immune surveillance. They aren't triggering the massive, explosive immune response we see with strep throat or a staph infection. Instead, they provoke a low-grade, simmering inflammatory response. The immune system detects subtle damage but can't mount a full-scale attack. No sudden spike in fever, no intense localized pain, just quiet, creepy damage over time. And that silent damage is incredibly insidious, particularly for women. The asymptomatic inflammation travels up the reproductive tract largely unnoticed, leading to pelvic inflammatory disease, PID. The immune system's constant low-level attempt to clear the infection creates scar tissue in the fallopian tubes, the exact same mechanism as the eyelid scarring in trachoma. This leads to ectopic pregnancies and, eventually, permanent sterility. From a public health standpoint, how do you stop an epidemic that is mostly invisible? You have millions of young, healthy-feeling people carrying an organism that is slowly causing irreversible reproductive damage. The answer relies almost entirely on aggressive, widespread screening programs, because if you wait for symptoms to prompt testing, the structural damage is often already done. NAAT testing is really the only weapon against asymptomatic spread. Quick pause. If this kind of deep dive breakdown is helping your ASCP prep, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. And if you want compact, high-yield study tools, check out my books, ASCP Short Notes in Hematology and ASCP Short Notes in Chemistry, both available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Now, if these stealth bacteria can't survive outside a host cell without their armored elementary body, how do some species adapt to target completely different environments? Because some members of this family have evolved to target our lungs rather than mucous membranes. Chlamydophila psittaci is a prime example. It causes psittacosis, commonly known as parrot fever, a major occupational hazard in turkey processing plants, and for people working closely with exotic birds, you catch it by inhaling dust from infected bird feces. The bacteria penetrate deep into the lungs, spread systemically to the liver and spleen, and cause a severe atypical pneumonia. This demonstrates the environmental resilience of that armored elementary body. It can survive in dried, desiccated bird droppings for months. When a bird flaps its wings or someone sweeps a barn floor, those droppings are disturbed, the EBs aerosolize, a worker breathes them in, and the whole intracellular hostage situation begins again, this time inside the human respiratory tract. Just from sweeping the floor. Its cousin, Chlamydophila pneumoniae, is responsible for about 10% of all community-acquired pneumonias, often presenting as walking pneumonia, with a biphasic clinical course starting with a prolonged sore throat before settling deep into the lungs days or weeks later. But modern microbiology has uncovered something deeply unsettling about this specific bug. It has been heavily implicated in asthma, and even more surprisingly, cardiovascular disease. Researchers are extracting arterial plaques from patients with heart disease and finding bacterial DNA embedded directly within the blockage itself. We usually think of heart disease as a dietary issue, a lifestyle choice, or bad genetics. The idea that plaque buildup could be linked to a respiratory bug completely flips the script. The causal link is still under intense investigation, We are not saying a bad cough today guarantees a heart attack next year. But the working theory involves macrophages, the white blood cells that act as the immune system's garbage trucks. They circulate through the body to clean up cellular debris and localized infection. The macrophage swallows the C. pneumoniae bacteria in the lungs, but instead of digesting it, the bacteria sets up its hidden factory inside the garbage truck itself. That infected macrophage then travels through the bloodstream and embeds itself in the wall of a blood vessel. The body senses localized infection in the artery wall, tries to isolate it, triggers a cascade of chronic inflammation, and over decades, that inflammation traps cholesterol and cellular debris, accelerating plaque formation. The pathogens need to hide triggers a lifelong systemic vascular disease. Now, the Chlamydia family spreads primarily through human contact or aerosolized dust. But another group of intracellular bacteria found a completely different evolutionary workaround for crossing massive physical distances. They use a multi-legged delivery system. We are moving into arthropod-borne pathogens, the Rickettsia family, transmitted by ticks, lice, fleas, and mites, and responsible for some of the most aggressive, rapidly fatal diseases in human history. Their survival strategy is brilliant. The arthropods aren't just vectors, they are the actual reservoirs. Through a mechanism called transavarial transmission, an infected female tick doesn't just carry bacteria in her gut. The bacteria physically infiltrate the tick's own reproductive organs, and when she lays her thousands of eggs, she passes the bacteria directly into the yolk of every single one. Every baby tick, every larva that hatches is born already loaded with the pathogen, ready to infect its very first host. The bacteria bypass the outside environment entirely. They don't need to survive in soil or water. They turn an entire multi-generational tick population into a permanent biological weapon. Once one of those ticks bites a human, the bacteria have a very specific target: endothelial cells, the flat, tightly packed cells lining the interior of every single blood vessel in the body, from the aorta down to the tiniest capillaries. When the bacteria invade these cells, multiply rapidly, and destroy them, they cause widespread vasculitis, inflammation of the blood vessels. The classic example is Rocky Mountain spotted fever, caused by Rickettsia rickettsii, spread by ticks, with a mortality rate of 20% without prompt antibiotic treatment. The hallmark symptom is a distinct rash that notoriously starts on the palms of the hands and soles of the feet. The mechanism explains exactly why: because the bacteria are systematically destroying the lining of the vascular system. The pipes throughout your body spring millions of microscopic leaks. That rash isn't an allergic reaction to bug saliva, it is comprised of petechiae, tiny, pinpoint hemorrhages. You are visibly bleeding just beneath the skin. And if it's happening visibly on the palms and soles, it's happening invisibly in the lungs, the brain, the kidneys, everywhere. The result is a massive, rapid drop in blood volume leading to profound hypovolemic shock. Blood pressure plummets, the heart cannot pump enough blood to supply vital organs with oxygen, and the cascade leads to kidney failure, neurological damage, and death. A tick bite is not a minor surface wound. It is a direct intravenous injection of a rapidly multiplying pathogen into your circulatory system. Epidemic typhus, caused by Rickettsia prowazekii, operates similarly, but spread by body lice thriving in overcrowding and poor sanitation. The horrific twist: it can lie dormant in the body and reactivate decades later as Brill-Zinsser disease, the bacteria hiding deep in host tissue, waiting for the immune system to wane before launching a secondary systemic attack years after the initial exposure. A sleeper agent. Scrub typhus, caused by Orientia tsutsugamushi, spread by chiggers and mites, leaves a very distinct necrotic black spot at the bite site, the eschar, a classic diagnostic sign. As devastating as attacking the blood vessels is, our final group does something even more biologically audacious. They don't just hide from the immune system. They actively seek out and infect the very white blood cells whose sole purpose is to destroy them. Meet Ehrlichia and Anaplasma. Normally, when foreign bacteria enter the bloodstream, white blood cells act as heavily armed security guards, hunting down invaders, engulfing them, and digesting them with powerful enzymes. But these bacteria have turned that very defense mechanism into a private nursery. Ehrlichia chafensis causes human monocytic ehrlichiosis, transmitted by the Lone Star tick. It specifically hunts down monocytes, white blood cells responsible for consuming debris and alerting the rest of the immune system. Anaplasma phagocytophilum causes human granulocytic anaplasmosis, transmitted by the black-legged tick, infecting granulocytes, and highly prevalent in the northeast U.S., Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire. What makes them unique is how they physically grow inside those white blood cells. Instead of floating freely in the cellular fluid, they replicate inside vacuoles, little membranous bubbles within the cell. As they multiply, they pack tightly together, forming dense, highly structured clusters called moruli, Latin for mulberry, which perfectly describes what these clusters look like under a high-powered microscope. The ultimate Trojan horse scenario. They aren't just breaking into the castle, they are hiding inside the armor of the castle guards, turning the guardhouse into a mulberry-shaped incubator. And this creates a profound diagnostic irony. In a standard clinical setting, when a physician suspects a severe systemic infection, they draw blood and look at the white blood cell count, expecting elevated numbers of healthy immune cells fighting the war. But with Ehrlichia and Anaplasma, the microbiologist has to look inside the white blood cell itself, searching for the mulberries hidden inside the guards. Spotting a single morula on a standard blood smear is extremely difficult and lacks sensitivity, which is why, once again, modern medicine relies on NAAT testing to find the bacterial DNA hidden inside the patient's own immune system. Let's recap the enormous ground we've covered today. We started with bacteria that transition into armored vehicles to build hidden cellular factories, causing widespread preventable blindness and a silent epidemic of reproductive damage. We explored respiratory bugs potentially embedding themselves in heart tissue, triggering lifelong vascular disease. And we examined tick-borne pathogens that either cause blood vessels to catastrophically leak or turn the immune system itself into microscopic incubators. An invisible war, and the enemy is hiding comfortably behind our own lines. I want to leave you with one final thought long after this video ends. Chlamydophila pneumoniae is found embedded in atherosclerotic plaques. Epidemic typhus lies dormant and reactivates decades later as Brill's disease. If these hidden hide bacteria can cause chronic, lifelong conditions that look absolutely nothing like typical acute infections, it forces us to ask a much larger question. How many chronic modern diseases, conditions we currently blame entirely on genetics, diet, or the wear and tear of aging, might actually have a stealthy intracellular bacterial root? Are our chronic, unexplained ailments actually ancient microscopic hostage situations playing out in slow motion over decades? We might spend our lives treating the surface symptoms of an invasion we can't even see. The house looks perfectly fine from the street, but the intruders have been living in the walls all along. If this video helped you, drop a like. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more ASCP deep dives just like this one. And don't forget, Mahone's textbook of diagnostic microbiology is linked below at a Walmart discount, and my ASCP short notes books in hematology and chemistry are on Amazon. Study smart, and I'll see you in the next one.